Hi, my name is Zoe Moores, and today at this, the 7th Live Subtitling and Accessibility Symposium, I will be talking to you about measuring the quality of intralingual respeaking at live events. I have logos from the University of Roehampton, Techne and Galma on screen, and a picture of me smiling at you. What is quality is a question we ask a lot when we talk about access. There is a picture of dial on screen, moving between low and high quality, with a question mark by it, because although we understand that high quality, equitable access is desired, many questions remain about precisely what this means. What criteria are used to define quality? Who decides what the standard for quality is and when it has been reached? Today, I will be focusing on the quality of live subtitles on television and live titles at events, referred to together as subtitles with the sub in brackets, that are created through intralingual respeaking. In this context, it is the accuracy of the written text in the subtitles that is taken as a main indicator of quality, referring both to how much of the original spoken content is included and the precision with which it appears. The model I am presenting today is the NERLE model, which is a refined version of the NER model for use at live events. I will begin by reviewing the rationale behind the NER model and explaining what it is about live events that requires a refined version of the model. I will then share some scenarios that illustrate the complexities of live events and the reason why a different assessment process is needed, which the NERLE provides. Finally, I will briefly present the NER and the NERLE assessment flowcharts, which capture the thinking behind this process. The handout that accompanies this presentation contains a clearer image and written outline of each model for you to refer to. The NER was designed to cope with the variety inherent in live subtitling on television, from the modality used to create the subtitles, to the program genre, and the degree of editing that is required, since practices differ from country to country. And it is a model that has been widely adopted. A particular focus of the NER was being able to accommodate respeaking, and in particular, the fact that edited subtitles can be accurate. The word error models that preceded it penalise any instance where the words in the written subtitle differed from what was said, even when there was no change in meaning. In contrast, in the NER, correct additions carry no penalty. Edition and recognition errors that do lead to a change in meaning are classified as serious, standard, or minor, and the penalties that result from them are weighted according to the impact they have on the viewer's comprehension. The penalty for a serious error is 1, a standard error 0.5, and a minor error 0.25. 98% is considered the threshold for acceptable accuracy. The calculation in the NERLE model is the same. The letters L and D stand for live events and do not represent a change in scoring. However, there is one fundamental difference between respeaking on television and at live events, and this difference means an adapted model is required in this new setting. This difference is in what interaction is possible in each setting. When respeaking on television, the respeaker researches the content beforehand and may even receive scripts which assist this preparation. Once the program begins, the respeaker watches, listens, and respeaks, essentially following and responding to the content that unfolds before them. They cannot communicate with anyone in the program. At live events, the scenario is very different. Everyone present can interact with each other and with the respeaker. And sometimes these interactions affect the decision the respeaker takes and the content of the titles. There is often a designated access coordinator who monitors the titles and intervenes if an error appears or some content is missed. The audience and presenters may also respond to the content of the titles. During my doctoral research, I assessed the quality of respeaking at 7 events, which included Q&As, panel discussions, museum tours, and presentations, all with varied audiovisual content. I began by using the NERLE to calculate accuracy, but I kept on finding that before I could assign an error, I had to carefully consider why something had been said and what the communicative function behind the words were. Often it wasn't immediately clear, in the context of the event, whether omitted words could be counted as a correct addition or whether a penalty needed to be applied. These decisions were often complex, and it was while making them that the assessment pathways for the NERLE were developed. I identified 3 general types of communication at live events. The first is additional information. This includes speaker ID and sound labels, which you would expect in most kinds of subtitles. But this information may also contain additions that are more specific to live events, including information about the event, a subtitle introduction, and positional or directional information about the action taking place. Next is functional or problem-solving communication that is used to resolve any issues that arise. There may be missing content, speaking which takes place off mic, technical problems with the audio or titles, or slowed or interrupted delivery. The final type is formal event content, the content you would expect at the event. Also included here is any communication related to new or complex vocabulary being used that the respeaker might struggle with, any errors in the titles, and occasions where the respeaker is addressed directly in what I call a reversed aside. When using the NERLE to assess quality, as the person scoring reviews each segment of the titles, there is a reminder for them to consider what needs to be respoken. The first part of this reminder reads, what content has a viewer requested? Whilst at larger events, where the titles are displayed to the whole audience, the respeaker will most likely be expected to respeak all the formal event content. In other scenarios, where a single person will be viewing the titles, they have a more specific request and may only require some of the content to be captured. In this scenario, omitting content that is not required would be a correct addition. Similarly, there may be other content that can be omitted, even for larger audiences. The reminder continues, if the content in the question is functional, remember the priority is to resolve the problem so that the event can continue. Here, the person scoring must consider why what was said was said. As we will see, in some situations, the words spoken may seem to belong in one communication type, but are actually part of another. This reminder is designed to encourage such reflection, and this explicit focus on the communicative function of what is said brings the NERLE a step closer to models such as the IRA, Eugeni 2017, and the WIRA, Eichmeyer-Hell forthcoming. These models approach quality from the perspective of how ideas are rendered and the extent to which communication is established. I will now share a few examples to give you a flavour of the decision process involved in different scenarios at live events. The first example relates to additional information and identifying speakers. Speaker ID is used on television and at events, but at live events it will probably be done with labels rather than colours. Possible errors include a name being spelt incorrectly, a generic label such as new speaker being used for one of the key presenters, or the wrong ID being assigned. Scoring must always be context dependent. It is important to consider what the impact was on the audience comprehension and on communicative function. How long was someone speaking with the incorrect label? Would the audience have realised the error because they were in the room? It may be that errors can be spotted more easily than when they appear on television. However, what is important to remember is that at live events, since people are present in person, there may be increased sensitivity when they occur. At the events I ran, many audience members wanted to know more about the people speaking. A subtitle introduction, where the speaker introduces the speakers and their voices in a similar vein to the visual audio introduction, might be a solution to this. Ideally, such a subtitle introduction would be written or agreed with the person it describes, so that appropriate language can be chosen for it. Next is functional and problem-solving communication. It is this communication type that can be the most complex to score. Take the scenario where, unrelated to any technical issue, the speaker omits something that was said. When working on television, the moment will have passed and the speaker will hopefully move on and focus on what is said next. At a live event, different responses might follow. The speaker may cue, "Please repeat that." The designated access coordinator may ask the presenter to repeat the missing content, or the presenter might notice on their own and repeat the content. But sometimes they decide not to and continue presenting new information. All these possibilities affect the content of the titles for the audience, as they will only see these exchanges if the speaker is able to re-speak them. The priority for the re-speaker should always be to continue re-speaking the formal event content or the content that has been requested. So when scoring, the first consideration is whether the main content is being captured. Only then would the scorer consider whether these functional exchanges needed to be titled. Very often, omitting these functional exchanges would be considered correct additions, but occasionally, the missing content itself becomes a joke or talking point and implicitly becomes part of the formal event content. And if this happens, omitting it would lead to an addition error. It might be a standard error, but this would depend on the context of the event. Since scoring happens after the event, capturing these subtleties can be difficult. The final type of communication is formal event content. From a communicative point of view, the formal event content is most similar to the content that is usually assessed by the NERLE. It is the planned content of the event. However, the dynamism of live events means that this content often evolves on the day in response to who is present and what is said. And the speaker often becomes part of this process. If the presenter starts introducing new complex vocabulary, the speaker might seek the presenter's help. They might offer a tentative spelling and signal it with a question mark in brackets, hoping that the presenter will offer the correct spelling. This is not something that could happen on television. The presenter may also draw the re-speaker into the event. They might offer help before being asked, if they realise that what they're saying might be challenging to re-speak. However, they may also decide to challenge the re-speaker on purpose to see what happens, sometimes leading to an error, and sometimes not. This interaction means that the re-speaker and the access they provide are integrated into the event as a whole. It also raises an interesting point about errors in correct additions, and a final difference between the NER and NERLE assessment flowcharts. The result of this difference in interactivity between television and live events is that the responsibility for errors also shifts. On television, errors might be caused through software misrecognitions or by addition errors made by the re-speaker. In both cases, it is the re-speaker alone who can correct them. At live events, along with the re-speaker, the presenter, designated access coordinator, and audience members may both contribute to errors and help to correct them. They may repeat information that was missed, correct errors in the titles, or supply correct spelling, with or without being asked. However, they may also cause content to be missed. Presenters may forget to repeat a question or comment from the audience, or choose not to repeat missing information even after being asked. Although not caused by the re-speaker, penalties would still be applied for these errors if they impact on viewers' comprehension. So, the differences between the assessment processes needed in the NER and NERLE are subtle yet significant. This is a NERLE assessment flowchart. The rings indicate the places where the NERLE differs from the NER and which I have been illustrating. Questions 1 to 3 contain a reminder to consider what content needs to be prioritised. There is a reminder that everyone present may contribute to errors and achieve correct additions. And finally, the question about tentative spellings and how to score them is new, as this is not a possibility on television. Remove these elements, and you have the NER assessment flowchart. So to conclude, the NERLE is a modified version of the NER that has been adapted to live events. The fact that it incorporates correct additions is as important in the NERLE as it was in the NER. Where the NERLE differs most from the NER is the added attention that is placed on the communicative function of the different exchanges that take place between those present at the event. And this brings it more in line with models such as the IRA and WIRA. This also means that the NERLE can be applied to varied settings. What is essential is that the expectations of what content needs to be captured is clear to everyone before the event begins and to the person scoring, so that they can make an accurate assessment of the quality seen in the titles. The NERLE is a new model, so further research would be very welcome. Questions which remain include how well this model suits other speech-to-text modalities, testing to determine what the inter-rater agreement might be, and whether similar adaptations might apply to the NTR model for interlingual respeaking when used at live events. Thank you very much for your attention. Please do get in touch with any questions or comments.